Well, my parents, Ruth and Lyle Rue, were married at St. Ed's back in the 1930s. And my mother grew up in the parish, and my dad did not. But after the war, they came back. My dad was a carpenter. He and one of his business partners, his not business partner, one of his carpenter friends, partners, started the store. They bought the store, and originally it was two floors. The store was on the first level, and there was an apartment above that. We lived on the apartment above, and the other couple lived down below. But the store was really an incredible thing. Now you have to think back to the time in the 1950s. There were no real supermarkets. They were just getting started. So most people bought their groceries on a daily or weekly basis at the most because they didn't have large freezers, they didn't have large refrigerators. So it was important for them to shop every day. The store my parents had filled a lot of those daily needs. It was a very small store, so they couldn't do everything, but the things people needed every day, produce, bread, milk, newspapers, those things were all there. And they could get hot dogs, they could get hamburgers, chips, all the normal snacky type foods that you could get. And then on Fridays, because the Fridays were meatless when I was growing up, they would have spaghetti. We were open 6.5 days a week. We were open Monday through Friday, and then all day Saturday till, I don't know, usually till about 6:30. But then on Sunday mornings, the store was open because there was no place to buy stuff at that time. Very few stores were open on Sundays. So the store was open until noontime. So it was effectively during all the morning masses. And they would order sweet rolls, bread. People would come in and buy cold cuts, for sandwiches and whatever they were going to have that Sunday afternoon. And it was really kind of a community type center because St. Ed's at that time was a very close community of people, and everybody knew everybody. Most of the moms, as you can imagine, didn't work during the day. I mean, a lot of them were telephone operators at night and things like that. But for the most part, the moms were always there. So for kids roaming around the neighborhood, it was a very safe place because all the moms always knew what was going on with all the kids. And if I got into trouble, my mom and dad knew about it before I even got home. So it was one of those kind of neighborhoods. It was very close, a wonderful place to grow up. So it was a very close community. In fact, there's an alumni website on Facebook where a lot of the St. Ed's alums get together, and I've found a lot of people that I actually went to school with that still check in from time to time. Well, see, what part of it was they were having the 50th reunion of my graduating class in 2023, and so I was not able to attend that because they had a nice gathering at St. Ed's. They went to mass and then had a dinner after that at the church I believe it was in the school. So that was kind of what got me back in touch with a lot of people that I remembered from school. And of course, they had pictures on the Facebook group, and I got in touch with a few people that I knew. But you had asked about the store and its relationship with the parish. Well, my mom and dad were very closely aligned in the parish, and activities. They had stuff going on at St. Ed's every single night. My dad was in the Holy Name Society and was president at one time. My mom was very active in the St. Anne's Sodality. It was a women's group that met maybe every couple of weeks or whatever, but they always had novenas going on. My mom and my aunt had, it was a specific novena this month that they were doing. And so one of my greatest memories of my mom was on her knees at night before she went to bed saying a rosary. Being adopted, I have a very different personality from my adopted dad. And so we would butt heads every once in a while because he was very old school German, and there was one way of doing things, his way. And so you can imagine some of the things that went on. everything to my dad. He did because he felt like it was the right thing to do, but it all became a ministry for him because I mean, he would be right there when people needed people to talk with. He would always seek people out that looked like they were lost or they looked like they were, looking for guidance or something like that. So, even to the point where he was on his deathbed, he was continuing to teach me about life, which in the final analysis is really the most important thing. I mean, he knew nothing about all the engineering stuff I studied, all the science, all he didn't he didn't comprehend that stuff. And for my mom and dad and that generation, for me to ask him, are you happy with what you're doing or what your work is, like it was for me? It was very important for me to be happy in what I was. I don't think he didn't even understand the question. I mean, he just did what was
Mhm.
his mind the right thing to do, period. And that was the way he grew up. That was the way my mom grew up. We were always delivering food to people. We were always checking in on the older people in the neighborhood because they needed milk, they needed bread. So sometimes my mom and dad would send me over with stuff after school just to deliver to somebody's house. So for me right now, it's just trying to get back to what did that store look like? And I'm trying to picture it in my mind. And that was why I was really doing this search to try to find photographs. I
Mhm.
could wander the neighbor. My mom and dad never knew where I went. We would go up the we'd get on our bikes and go up the La Woods. Looking back, it was a very safe place. They let me wander. I wandered the neighborhood. In fact, I went into St. Ed's school before I was even able to go to school. The nuns were very gracious, and it was at that time mostly nuns. There were very few lay teachers. There were teachers. Sister Amelia, I remember, she was, I think, maybe a seventh or eighth grade teacher at the time. But I would wander into her classroom, and she had a little chair. She put a chair in the back corner for me, and as long as I behaved myself, I could sit there and listen to her teach class. So it was fun. So even before I started school, it was very close to me. Let's see. I enjoyed St. Ed's very much. The teachers were very gracious. The nuns always talked about the rosary as being the back door into heaven because, you pray the rosary and, good things would happen. Again, not technically good theology in the Catholic Church, but it was kind of what the nuns taught. And they're very motherly, very, very, it was a wonderful time. And of course, looking back, we didn't realize it at the time. We just did whatever the nuns told us.
Mhm.
But it was only later that we realized these were really, in many cases, very poor women that came over from Ireland and came from other places. And to be a nun was a way to get an education for them. So a lot of the nuns were taking college classes even while they were trying to teach us. And then after school, all of us were there in the schoolyard all the time.
Mhm.
I lived directly next to the school. So I could go right out my door and with my little 25-cent rubber ball, I could be throwing the ball up against the wall and catching it with my mitt. Or at that time, there were steps in the front of the school that went up. The actual entrance to the school was on the second level.
Mhm.
And so we played all kinds of games on the steps, and that was kind of our gathering place. And when we weren't doing that, we were across the street in the schoolyard playing softball. And when it wasn't football or basketball season, that was what we were playing in the schoolyard. But the store was really kind of interesting because I started to tell you about my parents' activities. There were also bowling leagues. Everybody bowled at that time. And these were people from all over the parish. And that was kind of where a lot of the parish business got done because it was kind of all the same people and same families. And this is kind of how they communicated. I started talking about the groceries and how people bought things on a daily or regular basis. But mass at school or mass in the church for the school kids was like, maybe I'll say 8 o'clock, so where we started our school day by going to mass, and then we all went over to school.
And those were in Latin too for the kids.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. And in fact, it was only when I got to be a freshman in high school, I started doing the mass in English.
Mhm.
And, the Vatican II was just going on at that time. So it was too late to do me any good as an altar boy. But I never had to learn to serve mass in English. But a lot of kids, would come before school and get snacks or whatever. And then at lunchtime every day, the store had lunches for kids. But they had, yeah, my mom and a couple of my aunts were there during the day, and they would have this big vat of hot dogs that they would make up, and some hamburgers that they would do. And it was a regular, like a cafeteria line almost. And it was very, very reasonably priced, I guess. I'd never had to buy it myself, but I was told it wasn't. So this was kind of an everyday kind of thing that would go on with the store and the school. And it worked out fine. We would supply the rectory with food, with groceries. And then any type of special events, my mom and dad would cater, and then they'd go work in the kitchen. There was one of my favorite activities, and you asked me about one of the things I remember most. Every year we had what was called a fall festival, and I don't know if anything like that
They still
still
have it, yeah.
do they? Well, it was
Mhm.
it was a time when in the gymnasium people would come over and they would set up booths, just normal carnival type things, and it was the little things where even school kids could go and they could, pay a quarter and throw ping pong balls and get little goldfish in goldfish bowls,
Mhm.
or canes. Everybody kind of like there were wooden canes that you could get, and everybody liked wooden canes and hats and things that they could, cheap things that people would have for prizes. But it was a big deal, and it was like uh, I want to say Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of a week. But then there was always lots of food, and my mom and dad were always in the kitchen preparing the food. They they procured it all for the school and the church, and then prepared and served it. So that was kind of their thing of what they did.
Yeah, you said that you would donate. Yeah, no, that's great that you learned service from a young age, and of course, yeah, that helps that your parents were great role models in that way.
Mhm. So for all the time they owned the store, and they sold it when I was in, I'll say seventh or eighth grade. And then we moved around the corner on Lowell Avenue. So I finished off seventh and eighth grade there before going on to St. Pat's High School. There were also lots of um, ethnic community groups. There were the Polish group, there was an Armenian group, a Ukrainian group, and they would, and the kids in these various ethnic groups, I mean, they had their things to do with their cultural group as well. Of course, there were Irish and Italian, and we had it all going on. There was also something which was very interesting, and it would be very politically incorrect now, but it was something called a minstrel show. It wasn't really a racial thing, but it was a chance to show off the talent. It was really more a talent show than anything else. And people in the neighborhood would sing, they would tell jokes, they would dance, they would do all kinds of things. And again, a lot of it was from people's different ethnic backgrounds. They would have, particular kinds of costumes and dances and music and that kind of thing, which was really very fun. Um, so it was I'll say a very close-knit group of people. I was an altar boy, living across the street from the church.
Mhm.
When I became an altar boy, I necessarily became typically the one who served 6 o'clock masses. We had 6 o'clock masses at that time. And so because I was right there. I always got on the schedule for the early masses. It was little old ladies and little old men that would be up at that ungodly hour, and usually it would be a priest or a visiting priest, and we would be downstairs in the basement church. It was a very interesting experience that I remember to this day. Plus the fact that the masses were in Latin, so I mean everything was all. We never really talked to anybody in English during the course of the mass. But the funny thing is, now I'm an old guy and I go to mass and I'm one of the old men that's there with one of the old women, and so it's interesting how time changes and you get a different perspective on things.
And I really appreciate your time.
I
Um,
appreciate you doing this, Valerie. It's brought up all kinds of wonderful ideas and thoughts from the past.